Off today with a hearty and warm welcome to everyone who is joining us today for the second day of our training. So welcome to our continuing soil health education training focused on best management practices for herbicide application and cover crop termination. Again, my name is Stephanie McLean. I'm joined by a great group of trainers and participants with me today, including Fred Whitford, Bill Johnson, Hans Schmitz, Tony Bailey, Adam Jones, Lisa Holscher, Sheila Schroeder, Jessica Hohen, Jessica Hain, that messes with me every time, and Shannon Zizula. So before we get rolling on our presentation topics and some other things, I'm just going to ask Jessica to briefly go over just a reminder of some of the Zoom topics and just a reminder for everyone of how to ask questions and communicate with us throughout the day.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. And no worries, you're not the first and won't be the last to mispronounce, and I really don't take offense. So, yep, today we are using the Zoom platform, if you haven't guessed already, but this is webinar, and we intentionally have this platform set up. If you'll notice, if you're an attendee, you don't have camera or microphone privileges. So if you have questions or comments for those presenting today, please feel free to put those into, if you find your panel, sometimes it's at the top, sometimes it's at the bottom, depending on your setup of your Zoom, but that Q&A function or the chat will go straight to the panelist. So all our speakers are on that, and we have Stephanie and Tony will be monitoring that, and they'll be throwing those questions out to the speakers whenever they feel it's appropriate. So please use those functions. We do generally try to use the Q&A for questions pertinent to the topics that are covered. If you have other technical difficulties, use the chat, but honestly, they're monitoring both of them and they'll catch all of it. So yeah, that's about all I got. So back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, so let's see here. I am going to quick do a screen share and get us rolling here. Kind of a recap from yesterday. Let's see here. There we go. So, so again, this is the training that we're going to be talking about and the topics that we're going to be hitting on today. Really hitting on efficient herbicide usage today with Fred. So we're going to start today off with a recap from the previous day and any burning questions that we had, which we had some burning questions. So I got a couple emails at the end of the day, just a few more questions about roller crimping. And kind of that question of whether it was a planned decision or not. Could I talk some more about timing when a person should be timing when they crimp? And again, a lot of that depends on the crop that you have there, the time that it was planted in your goals. But I'm going to kind of go into that into a little bit more detail. So again, we want to think about, all of these awarenesses of what the farmer's goal is. Are they looking to terminate? Are they just looking to put biomass on the soil surface? Because once you know what the goal is, it's going to help give you a lot more understanding and guidance of how to direct the farmer in moving forward. The things that we really want to think about or communicate when we talk about using a roller crimper for termination is that let's see here. There we go. That anthesis is really important, that the crop has to be at anthesis. So this is when the plant is flowering. So not jointing, not early dough stage, none of those types of stages of our cereal rye plant in particular, but the actual flowering period of the plant. And it's actually better if we would say we need to see full flower, like not just starting to flower, but full flower. If you do crimping before that, you'll have poor termination. The other thing that is really important to think about with this, if we have farmers that are interested, is that your cover crop seeding rate and the seeding date from last fall play a huge factor in the success of crimping. So when you want to roller crimp, it needs to be a pretty high biomass out there. So we need to have a lot of plant growth. And the way that we get a lot of plant growth is through higher seeding rates. That's one of the things that we like to see out there. So when I'm talking about seeding rates, if you notice there on the third bullet, and my spelling error that I have there, but a minimum of a bushel. I would say most of our experienced roller crimper farmers who are using roller crimping with cereal rye for termination, it's 2 bushels that they're putting out there. And for context with cereal rye, that's 120 pounds. So again, thinking about, we want to see more than 60 bushels of cereal rye out there for good quality roller crimping termination. If you have lower seeding rates, then what happens is that that biomass may not actually be effectively crimped, and it is more likely to stand back up. It doesn't always make sense that to have a thicker biomass is going to result in a better termination, but for some reason you need that biomass to push down and have that crimper crimp those materials. If not, it actually just more kind of pushes into the soil and doesn't get crimped properly. So again, seeding date as well. The later we get into the fall, the less biomass we get. And that holds true in the fall and all the way through the spring. If it's seeded late, usually we see lower biomass amounts throughout the entire next spring. The other thing that's important to think about when we want to talk to farmers about roller crimping, or if they're interested in it, is that you want to make a call on that early in the season. It's again one of those game day calls or one of those reading of the seasons. So, and kind of an if-then situation again. If your stand is thin, if you don't have a lot of biomass, if you already have weeds present that are out there in the field, then you have to be realistic about the fact that roller crimping will likely not provide you the benefit that you want. So how do you know if your crimping failed? If you roll the crimper over the cover crop and it stands back up, it's not working. That means the cover crop was crimped too early. Some of your options would be to consider re-crimping, or to consider an herbicide application after planting, if you're doing this before, if you're crimping before planting, or again, if it is that you are crimping after you've planted, you're going to have to either come back and crimp that again, or just go out there and terminate with an herbicide application. How do you know if it's failed? If you have a severed stem instead of a crimped stem, again, the goal of crimping is that when that roller crimper goes over it, that stem is actually crimped. And so the xylem and the phloem in the plant are actually severed, but the plant itself is still attached to the roots. And that's really important. If the stem itself is severed, there's a chance that the plant roots may be induced to start regrowing vegetative material. And if that happens, you're going to have to come back and use an herbicide application to terminate. And again, if there's already weeds growing through the biomass, so you've crimped it, it actually died, but now you see weeds coming through, it's an indicator that you had too low of a seeding rate that was used last fall. There's a lot of researchers out there across the country, Aaron Silva up in Wisconsin, and others throughout all the other states in this north central region, that really talk about 5,000 to 8,000 pounds of biomass is what you need to have a successful weed control strategy, and that is dry biomass. So just some things about crimping and some pictures to kind of help you. So this is a picture of a soybean field. It's a cereal rye cover crop, and the farmer planted some soybeans in there. And so this is that discussion that we hear some farmers talking about, where I'm going to plant my soybeans into this and allow the soybeans to grow and emerge right? And then I'm going to come back and crimp that at like the V2 or the V3 stage. So you have 2 trifoliates, or your 3rd trifoliate of your soybean is about to come out. Now, I'm going to just pause right here a second and say, this is not something that we recommend that farmers try the first time they're roller crimping, but we also know that there's a lot of interest in this. So what I want you to be aware of, if a farmer's talking to you about this, is that there's a lot of potential train wrecks here. Okay, so this is not something that we want to recommend, but it's something that we need to know about so that we can help farmers troubleshoot it if they think they want to try this. So in this field here, this farmer has soybeans planted, and he's now going to come in and roller crimp. But I need you to take a look at this field. We see some pollen out there, right? But I don't see 50% of the seed heads in this visual picture here with pollen on them. So this is too early. That's the first thing that you want to think about when you're going into a field. Does 80% or more of the seed heads that you're looking at have full pollen on them? And when I'm talking about pollen, it's all of these little yellow things that are on the seed heads here. All of those things will come out of the seed heads, and then if you shake the plant, this yellow pollen just spills everywhere. And so we can see some, but I see a lot of them, these taller ones up here that don't have any pollen on them. So again, a lot of short plants that have some pollen, some tall plants that don't. This indicates to me that this is probably a VNS, a variety not stated seed mix, because we have all of these different heights of cereal rye, and then we see so much difference in the pollen, in this plant actually starting to pollinate and go to seed. So we want to really look at this and say, I don't know if this is quite ready. But this farmer went and roller crimped here. And so a couple of things that we might be looking at here, or give you some evidence of a concern, is that this field is crimped, but we see a lot of bare soil here. So again, and there you can see our little soybeans growing in there, but see a lot of bare soil. So, so after this field is crimped, we see all of this bare soil. This to me is an indicator that the seeding rate was probably too low for an effective roller crimping practice. And then here, this picture up on the top, if you see that this was roller crimped, but as you look at this, you can actually see like these plants are starting to stand back up. Even in the middle of where the roller crimper was, it's actually pushing back up. The biomass itself is starting to push up. Again, that means it was probably too early to be crimped, and likely too low of a seeding rate to really have an effective practice roller crimping action occur. And again, there was soybeans in there, so we had low biomass, and so we didn't get a good crimping on the cereal rye, but we actually are going to have some damage on these soybeans. And the farmers that are doing this talk about a little bit of damage and that it might be okay. But again, these are very experienced farmers. This is not something that a new cover crop farmer is trying. And there's a chance that in many cases here, if you see this damage on this stem, this soybean is not going to survive. We're going to see stand loss here. This is not what we want to have happen with our farmers that are just stepping into cover crops. So even though this is a really neat and innovative practice that has the potential to significantly reduce herbicide application across farms and allow a farmer to try some different things, it's not something that we want to jump into without giving a lot of thought to this. So again, this was a site that I had the opportunity to go out to, and this farmer really wanted to try this, but had some unfortunate things happen, but I do think it was a good learning experience that he was able to take back from this and reevaluate how to better use this practice in his operation. But again, it's not something that we want to have happen regularly, and it's not something that we want to advise farmers to do. Again, if they don't have a high biomass, if they aren't experienced no-tillers, and have tried roller crimping successfully without having a growing cover crop, or without having a growing crop in it.
Stephanie, it's Fred. Can you go back one before we leave? Can you go
Yes.
back the one slide?
One more? Okay.
Yeah, that one right there. One more, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
So what that, I got two questions. One is, I said, God, that's a pretty good stand. I mean, looking at it as somebody who's a novice at this, I'm thinking, man, that's a really good stand, but you really can't look at it and tell that it's a good stand until you actually push it over and you see the ground. Or I mean, I guess you could do that there, but so is that, so you can't really look at it. I mean, you really have to look hard at the soil surface to determine if this crimping could work and or was it planted correctly. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
high?
Fred, that's absolutely the case. You know, if to get called out and look at this and say, do you think I could crimp this? Just like yesterday when Adam and Hans were working through their phone call, the first question I would ask is what was your seeding rate? When did you get it seeded? You know, we have some nice biomass here, but those things would actually help me kind of indicate, are we going to see more biomass coming on? And like you said, I would probably go into this field and push it down with my hands, or sometimes even if you walk through and step it down and then go back and look at it, how fast is it coming back up
Yeah.
behind you? Those are indicators of either waiting, or two, if there's a lot of bare soil, maybe roller crimping shouldn't be done on this field because we don't have enough biomass.
But at this point, it's too late. But the second question is, I don't know if what you said, looking at 80% of pollination here, and I have different varieties, it would seem to me, if that's the case, that if I'm going to crimp, I am going to be planning ahead and not having whatever you called it, non-determined.
Yeah, VNS.
I would rather have a stand that's uniform to be able to do my crimping. This just kills me on that 80% because they're nowhere near. I mean, I can't meet that threshold.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point. If you are going to consider roller crimping, or farmers are interested in doing this, we really advise farmers look to specific varieties. And again, some of the research that's been done out there with people that are really into roller crimping is they recommend a few varieties like Elbon and Arustic because they break dormancy potentially a little bit earlier in the spring, and they may go to anthesis a bit earlier. But just like our cornfields and our bean fields, where we plant one variety because it allows consistency through the growing season, we're actually looking for that with this cereal rye as well.
And Stephanie, that was a comment that kind of came in, that probably the issue isn't so much about the stand, but it's just that it's a VNS and it's not the same maturity. So there's another question that came in. If you want to move to the other slide, what was the final yield from this field there with the soybeans? Do you have any idea what that was, how that came out?
No, I don't.
Okay. And I think we could kind of guess that it's going to cause damage to some of the soybeans. It's not going to on all. We've ever heard of these things where if you go in and there's cause damage to the beans, sometimes they proliferate and do better with that. But there's a fine line there sometimes. And some products, we've seen that with some chemicals might do that. But if you're killing the plant here, like at the stem, that might be a different issue.
Yeah, and I think when we were doing some of the stand counts, what we did is we actually found a row, and I think it was looked for either 10 or 20 beans, I can't remember, and then counted the percentage that was actually crimped over and had a crimp on its stem. And I think the concern was if we got over I can't remember if it was 10% or what it was, thinking about acceptable stand loss, that all of a sudden that it was a little bit of a concern. And so I can't remember exactly what we were counting on that, but this was just, again, that evaluation of this to show that we were seeing quite a bit of damage to the soybeans here.
And this comment from Don, you do not want to crimp when the beans are necking through. So
correct. So again, we talk about trying to crimp if we have soybeans in this field, that we want to crimp when we see that when we have two trifoliates out. So we want to have those two trifoliates out and the third about to come out or the third opening up. So when Don talks about necking through, that would be just when that seed is starting to emerge from the soil, or a little bit after that. So again, thinking about how soybeans come out of the ground, they push their neck up first, and then the cotyledons will come up after that. And so when it's necking up, if this is sticking up out of the ground like this, and you roll or crimp, you'll actually kill the plant. So that is not a good thing. We don't want that to happen.
Stephen, again, another question. If you're, and again, new, if you're going to use pictures of what you've seen, which is great, it tells me that Stephanie went out to this field and actually saw this. But you know that when you show this, farmers are going to ask you, what was the yield? All right. So if you're going to show pictures of you going out to a field such as this, especially when we have damage, we should follow up, Stephanie, and get the yields if we can, or we think about it. I mean, there's a lot to do here, but you know you're going to be asked that question. And so it would be a phone call to figure out what the yields were, right? And you trust whoever tells you, because then you can say, by doing this, we either had no yield, or we had a 5% or so many bushels or whatever, right? It's important because you know you're going to be asked that. So again, that's.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm taking way more time than I need to here, and I'm eating into your time, Fred. So I'm going to just kind of quick finish through here too, thinking about when to crimp. When we are looking at hairy vetch, we want to make sure that we are almost into pod set before we start crimping, which we don't see a lot of that happening in the state. But cereal rye, we have a lot of farmers that are wanting to incorporate roller crimping as a management practice. And so again, we're looking at that. According to the Zadocs, we want to think about those stages of 61 through 69. So anthesis, where we are shedding lots of pollen, and if your tractor radiator isn't getting plugged up with pollen when you're out there roller crimping for termination, then you're crimping too early. So these are indicators of the time to roller crimp for termination. Is there's pollen everywhere and it's plugging up the radiator of your tractor. And just here's another picture of what we're talking about when we talk about anthesis. When pollination starts, it starts in the middle of the seed head for cereal rye. And I think all small grains, but for sure for cereal rye. And then what it does is it slowly works its way up and down the seed head. So again, here's a plant that is in full pollination or full anthesis. So we see pollen and the anthers all the way up and down the seed head here. So that's really important to be looking for. If we're just seeing this first part right here, that's not soon enough. We need to see the seed head looking like this second picture here. And again, that would be an example as well, just thinking about when we're in that full pollination mode. Where did the pictures go? Oh my goodness, there they are. So thinking about that with hairy vetch as well. So those are all the pictures that I have here. Again, this was just a follow-up from some of the questions that we got after the session yesterday. And again, just the reminder that this is a new and well, not really new, but a really innovative practice. And we have a lot of people that are very interested in this. But there is a learning curve to using a roller crimper. And if the farmer is still dealing with the learning curve of incorporating cover crops into his or her operation, and also dealing with the learning curve of successful termination, adding this into there right away is not a good idea. There's a lot of things that they can learn first and then step into this and be more successful if they get other termination strategies and cover crop seeding dates and everything like that down first. So with that, I'm going to